Hey there and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful idea in education, moving beyond that old one-size-fits-all approach to a curriculum that actually connects with every single student. Okay, let's get into it.
So just think about this for a second. In a country filled with so many different cultures, landscapes, and communities, can one single curriculum really work for everybody? I mean, does a textbook designed in a big capital city really make sense for a student in a remote coastal village or way up in a mountain farming town? That's really the core question we're looking at today. And this really presents us with two completely different paths. On one side, you've got the standard curriculum. You know the one, mostly generic textbooks, pretty straightforward. But on the other, you have what's called a contextualized curriculum. This is one that adapts, that uses local examples, local culture, and local resources to make learning truly come alive. It's a difference between just reading about the world and actually understanding your place in it. First up, let's talk about tailoring the curriculum. This is all about making education a perfect fit, not making the student fit the education. And, this whole idea isn't just a nice theory. It's actually the law. The Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013 says it right there that the curriculum shall be contextualized and localized. That's a huge deal. It gives this whole movement a real solid legal foundation. So, what do those two words actually mean in practice? Let's start with contextualization. Basically, it's all about adapting the national curriculum so that it connects with a student's real life. The goal here is simple, but also pretty profound, to make learning relevant, engaging, and just plain effective by linking it to the world right outside the classroom. So what does that actually involve? Well, it really breaks down into four key elements. It's about making lessons relevant to the local environment. It's about weaving in local culture and heritage, tackling real community issues, and making use of local resources, everything from materials to actual people in the community. So what does this look like in the real world? Okay, let's take a science class. If you're in a rural town that's surrounded by farms, that class might focus on local farming practices, the different types of soil, and the cycles of the crops. But take that same science class with the same national standards and put it in a coastal village. Now, you might be studying marine ecosystems, the tides, and local fishing methods. It's the same subject, same core concepts, but in completely different and deeply relevant contexts. And the same idea can get even more specific, which brings us to our next term. And that term is localization. You can think of this as a more focused, a more granular version of contextualization. This is where schools get right down to the nitty-gritty, modifying what they teach to reflect things like unique local industries, the languages people actually speak, and the challenges a community might be facing. It's about making sure students are learning skills that are directly useful to their lives. So how do teachers make this happen? Well, they can adapt lessons with local examples, maybe using local currency and math problems. They can use local materials in their projects. They can invite community experts, an elder, a fisherman, a weaver, to come in and share their knowledge. And they can design projects that actually help solve a real community need. Okay, next section, honoring Indigenous knowledge. This is where we get into an even deeper connection to culture and community. And that brings us to indigenization. This is all about weaving Indigenous knowledge, values, and languages directly into the very fabric of the curriculum. It's an incredibly powerful way to preserve culture, to validate Indigenous identity, and to make sure that education reflects the worldview of Indigenous learners. This means doing things like incorporating traditional knowledge, say about folk medicine or sustainable farming, right into a science class. It means using Indigenous languages as the main way of teaching in the early grades. And it absolutely means partnering with community elders and leaders, recognizing them as the vital sources of knowledge that they are. And this isn't just happening on its own. It's officially supported through the Indigenous Peoples Education Program, or IPED. This program provides a framework so that schools can create a curriculum that is truly culturally sensitive and is aligned with the unique needs and rights of Indigenous communities. All of which brings us to our third big principle, creating a classroom for everyone. And this is all built on the foundational idea of inclusion. So what is inclusion? It's really a commitment. It's a promise that every single student, no matter their ability, their disability, or their background, has a right to learn and to succeed right alongside their peers in a mainstream classroom. The goal is to tear down the barriers and create a welcoming place for absolutely everyone. So how do you build that? Well, it takes real conscious effort. It requires making sure everyone can fully participate, using all kinds of different teaching methods, providing the support services that kids need, and fostering a culture of genuine respect. And maybe most importantly, it means collaborating very closely with parents and families. And it's so important to remember that inclusion isn't just about one group. It's a really broad principle. It covers students with special educational needs. It covers Indigenous learners through programs like iPed. It's for marginalized groups from low-income or remote areas. And it even includes gifted and talented students who need their own kinds of opportunities to really soar. Okay, finally, let's talk about the promise and the challenge. It's really important that we take a realistic look at this whole thing. The benefits of doing this are just transformative. When students see themselves and their communities reflected in what they're learning, their engagement just skyrockets. This whole approach preserves culture, it develops critical thinking by having them tackle real-world problems, and it enhances skills that are actually relevant to their future. But of course, there are some real hurdles here. How do schools balance these local needs with national standards? How do we give teachers the massive amount of training and support they're going to need to do this effectively? And what about resource limitations, or just the time it takes to adapt materials with true cultural sensitivity? These are not small challenges, but they are things that can be overcome. So I want to leave you with this thought. How can a curriculum be more than just a list of subjects to learn? How can it become a mirror that reflects a student's own identity, their culture, and their community right back at them, empowering them to see their own value and their own potential? That, right there, is the ultimate promise of making school matter.